when we say youth, first of all, what age, what's the age span that we're talking about? And we can, we can go to the promise of adolescence and sort of articulate that when we mean youth, we're talking from, 10 to mid 20s in terms of just that developmental period. But as we've been doing this work at the state level, the local level, you'll talk more about SparkAction and the organizing work that you're doing. What are the different populations of young people that we're working with? So we have terms like opportunity youth. We clearly are digging in now around racial equity and social justice. What about other young people who have special, special needs and special interests? How are we really sort of making sure that when we say all youth, we're really getting to all youth?
Yeah, Ian, if you can put up the next slide, I think this gets into it a little bit. So as I was going back and grading our performance on the various things that we've tried to do in unfinished business, the one that I give us the lowest marks are related to what you just asked, Karen. So youth development arguments from the paper. Youth development arguments were made in many ways developed as a response to an implicit double standard: fix those who are in trouble, develop those who are not. So that was, in suburb would have a enrichment after school program, and in inner city would have a gang prevention program. And so because of that, we intentionally said, let's create normalizing language around this. So as we reflected back in that paper, the lessons in the past decades suggest that youth populations at the high ends of age and risk continua, older youth, especially those 18 to early 20s, but even the 14 to 17-year-olds and high-risk youth, those young people who are already out of school, engaged in high-risk behaviors, or involved with the courts, were not as well served by the paradigm shift. By advancing normalizing language, all youth are at risk, all youth need support. To gain broader appeal, we may have had the least impact on those we're most trying to help the most. Recent data, for example, confirm the risks associated with disconnected youth, but this will not happen unless we intentionally prioritize this population. Where I give us high marks is we've now intentionally prioritized that population. What I think if I had a do-over, I might come back to do-over is the idea of, is advancing normalizing language, is that necessarily the right way to go? This for me has really come to the fore with a lot of the thinking over the years by critical race theory, by anti-race, or being an anti-racist, that really challenge this notion of, is neutrality the right way to talk about these things? So let's see a couple things I pulled up. Critical race theorists believe that political liberalism was incapable of adequately addressing fundamental problems of injustice in American society, notwithstanding legislation and court rulings advancing civil rights in the 1950s and 60s, because its emphasis on the equitable treatment under the law of all races, colorblindness, rendered it capable of only recognizing the most overt and obvious racist practices, not those that were relatively indirect, subtle, or systemic. Obliviousness or neutrality are part of white supremacist structure as a society, so neutrality is structurally racist. So these are things that if I had a do-over, I would probably think about different ways to doing that. I think in many ways this is right back to the dilemma I saw in high school, right? White people who feel they don't have a racist bone in their bodies, and yet we're perfectly content to benefit from systems that put in place to perpetuate their advantage. There's great stuff out there now. I mentioned the structural racism. Arnold Chandler's life course framework is amazing at really walking through the intergenerational effects from slavery. On implicit bias. It says my internet connection is unstable, so I'm going to slow.
You froze for a minute, but you're back.
All right. So the work on implicit bias, right, is so important now that anyone raised in the US, the media we consume, the systems we interact with, create implicit biases and really showing that these racist biases get embedded in the marrow of our bones, rendering the whole notion of not having a racist bone in our body patently false. So we're pushing on that front, on equity front. We're pushing to get ourselves past our comfort zones. I think ultimately we need to get to a place where we openly acknowledge that we're not going to be able to change the odds for young people of color until we also succeed in changing the odds that police who killed them are held accountable. And these are the type of things that aren't normalizing language and are harder things to have to put on the table, but I think we're going to need to get to. And we also, we're really going to have to navigate our commitment to meet people where we are with also a more recent commitment to be more explicit about telling people where we stand. 2 days ago, the governor of Idaho signed a law prohibiting Idaho public schools, including universities, from teaching critical race theory. Does that mean we're never going to work with someone in Idaho? Of course not. We're still happy to work with people, wherever they are, but we also shouldn't hide the fact that we find that type of action abhorrent. And if by telling some people where we stand, I actually think we're going to get a lot more interest in our work, but some people may then choose, all right, I no longer work with the forum now that they are clear about where they stand and what their values are. And I think we have to be okay with that. And I think we will be okay with that.
Yeah, and this is a journey that the forum is on, as are many other organizations. And it's a journey that we're on, frankly, that will obviously continue to go on with me not at the helm. But I think we are positioned to actively grapple with all of those things just because of the breadth and depth of what the forum does and the number of different places where we work, where we do have a commitment to meet people where they are, meet leaders where they are, as you said. But learning how to meet them where they are and be transparent about where you are, while also finding a way to support people moving forward, is a big deal.